Somewhere on a glacier straddling the Austrian-Italian border, there is a body you have almost certainly heard of. Not because it was hidden, not because the science is obscure, but because what everyone thought they knew about it turned out to be wrong. In 1991, two hikers found a man face down in the ice. They assumed it was recent, a mountaineer maybe, or a soldier from World War I. Then they noticed the objects: a stone knife, shoes stuffed with grass, a copper axe. Carbon dating revealed the body had been frozen for over 5,000 years. Ötzi became an international sensation. For decades, archaeology could tell only part of his story. The real breakthrough came in the 2010 when researchers finally sequenced his complete genome. What the DNA revealed didn't just answer questions about who he was. It erased entire assumptions about where he came from, and what he carried in his genes would rewrite the story of how Europe was populated. The dominant model for prehistoric Europe was straightforward enough that nobody felt the need to question it. 45,000 years ago, modern humans arrived as hunter-gatherers. They foraged plants and hunted wild game for millennia. Then, about 7,000 years ago, everything began to change. Farming spread from the Near East. People started cultivating crops instead of chasing herds. By 5,000 years ago, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle had almost completely disappeared from the continent. It was one of the most revolutionary transformations in human history. Ötzi died right in the middle of this transition, around 3,300 BCE. And the archaeological evidence seemed to point both ways. His weapons were expertly crafted: a 6-foot longbow, arrows made from cornel and viburnum, woods that grow straight and harvest easily, hunter's tools. But his copper axe was one of the oldest metal tools ever found in Europe. Farmer's technology. His last meal, eaten hours before his death, told the same conflicting story. Wild ibex meat. Hunted. Mixed with einkorn wheat. Farmed. Ötzi was sending mixed messages about how he was living his life. The pollen in his stomach revealed he had been traveling up and down the mountain within the last 48 hours of his life. A man on the move. Then an arrow to the shoulder ended it, shot and left to die. For 20 years, researchers debated his identity based on objects alone. Archaeology reads artifacts. It cannot read bloodlines. Actual ancestry. The assumption was reasonable. He was found near the Italian-Austrian border. He must be Italian or Austrian. The assumption was also completely wrong. Ancient DNA work depends on preservation. Cold climates are ideal. Permafrost in Siberia, limestone caves in northern Europe, high-altitude glaciers in the Andes. Those are the places where genetic material survives for thousands of years. Ötzi had something almost no other ancient remains possessed. He was found in a natural desiccation chamber, a small trench in the glacier protected by large rocks on two sides. The trench eventually filled with 10 feet of snow and ice, preventing his body from being swept into the deadly frozen current that flowed around it. This makes him quite unique. He is the only natural ice mummy in the Alpine region. The ice preserved him, but also flattened him. The great weight of the glacier compressed his body into an ultra-lean frame, his face distorted. But inside the densest tissues, teeth and leg bones, tiny fragments of genetic material survived. Not much, not clean, but enough. Early DNA work revealed he had brown eyes, dark hair, blood type O. Lyme disease, making him the earliest known case. A predisposition to heart disease, challenging assumptions that this was a modern lifestyle problem. Arthrosis in his knees from constant mountain travel. But these were partial answers from limited genetic fragments. The real breakthrough required full genome sequencing, technology that did not exist when Ötzi was discovered. By 2012, researchers finally sequenced his complete genetic code, 3 billion base pairs. All the AS, TS, GS, and CS that make up human DNA. Random mutations in DNA create specific patterns. These patterns are inherited from parents. The closer two people are related, the more patterns they share. To find Ötzi's origins, researchers compared his patterns to ancient samples excavated from archaeological sites across Europe, some 45,000 years old from hunter-gatherer sites, others 7,000 years old from early farming communities. The answer came back clean, and immediately strange. Ötzi's DNA was a close match to ancient farmers, not hunter-gatherers. It became pretty clear that all of the individuals labeled archaeologically as farmers were closest to Ötzi. He was descended from farmers who had been in Europe nearly 2,000 years before he was born. But the trail went deeper. The same DNA patterns showed up in even older bones, found in some of the earliest known farming sites in the world, located in what is today Turkey. This suggested a specific migration pattern. Farmers migrated from Turkey to Europe starting around 7,000 years ago. They filled much of the continent. Eventually, they pushed aside most of the hunter-gatherers and their DNA. This was the Great Agricultural Revolution, now written in genetic code. Ötzi was a direct descendant of this farmer wave. His mixed artifacts now made sense. He was a farmer by ancestry, but lived in the mountains and supplemented with hunting. The copper axe, the wheat, farmer heritage. The bow, the wild game, mountain adaptation. His body told the story archaeology alone could not. But here is where it gets strange. If Ötzi descended from farmers who swept through Europe and he died near the Italian-Austrian border, his DNA should match modern populations in that region. Researchers compared his genome to modern DNA samples from all over Europe. Standard analysis should show closest living relatives. We figured he was probably Italian. Wrong. Didn't cluster with the Italians. Maybe he was Austrian? Wrong. Didn't cluster with the Austrians. Eastern European? Wrong. North African? Wrong, wrong, wrong. So where is this guy from? The answer came back unexpected. His closest living relatives were on the islands of Sardinia and Corsica. Totally unexpected. Over 600 miles from where he died. An island he almost certainly never visited. His closest living relatives are not in the Alps. They are on an isolated Mediterranean island. The question was not just surprising. It challenged the entire framework of what researchers thought they understood about European population history. Does this mean Ötzi was Sardinian? Not necessarily. The explanation reveals something larger about European population history. 5,300 years ago, when Ötzi was born, most people in Europe carried similar DNA patterns. These patterns came from the early farmer immigrants from Turkey, people in Italy, Austria, some France, Turkey's, Spain, Sardinia. All shared this genetic signature. They were all descended from the same agricultural wave that had swept across the continent. But over the last 5,000 years, Europe saw wave after wave of new immigrants. Bronze Age migrations, Iron Age movements, Roman expansion, medieval invasions. Each wave added new patterns of DNA to the mix. Modern Europeans are genetic composites, layer upon layer of ancestral input accumulated across millennia. Except on the isolated islands of Sardinia and Corsica. There, ever since the early farmers arrived, the population stayed relatively stable. Geographic isolation created genetic isolation. This wave of farmers that swept through Europe made it to Sardinia and stayed there as a genetic snapshot of what that wave of immigration looked like. Sardinians today carry the purest remnant of the original farmer DNA. They are not Ötzi's descendants. They are his genetic cousins. They represent what the European farmer population looked like 5,000 years ago, before all the subsequent mixing. This makes Ötzi a time capsule. His DNA is a snapshot of ancient Europe before the genetic landscape was rewritten. The same phenomena. Connected populations mix and moving, but when people do move, they reshape the genetic map. Ötzi's DNA proves the farmer migration was not just cultural exchange. It was an actual population movement. People carrying specific genetic patterns spread across Europe, replaced or absorbed hunter-gatherer populations. They were themselves partially replaced by later migrations, except in Sardinia, where the door closed early, and the ancient signature survived. Return to the man in the ice. He was not a symbol. He was a person, a trader, a herder, someone who endured 61 painful tattoos to ease chronic pain. He carried medicinal mushrooms up a mountain in his final hours, died from an arrow he never saw coming. He did not know he would become the most studied human being in history. Did not know his DNA would survive 5,000 years to reveal ancient migrations across continents. The technology that made reading his genome possible is the same technology now reaching into preservation sites that should be impossible. Hot deserts, humid caves, conditions that conventional wisdom said could not preserve readable genetic material. Every impossible recovery expands the territory where ghost populations might still be waiting. Ötzi is the gift that keeps giving. Each new analysis yields new insights into both human history and into the man himself. More ancient genomes are waiting in glaciers, in mountains, in frozen ground across Europe and beyond. The mummies are answering questions. We are only beginning to learn how to ask. We just have not yet learned to read all of what they are saying.